this, Kenyans from now National Stadium are saying, it seems Moi had a special place in Nyanza and also from Meru. Yeah. A lot of them have woken up very early to travel to Nyanza National Stadium to be there, 4 a.m., 5 a.m., they were there. So let's just hear from you before we continue with the issue of the Moi holiday as well. Jared, well, I can see from the statement you had here in Parliament, you say the former president sought forgiveness from anyone whom he may have wronged during his tenure, and as a Christian, may we find it in our hearts to forgive him.
Right. Yes.
And that was Millie Odhiambo. You said the former president did a lot of good things for the country. As a human being, he had his own imperfections, which we all do. May God put him where he deems fit.
Yes. Those were my sentiments yesterday.
Yes.
Well, I know today is a peculiar day where even discussions are quite intermittent.
Yes, yes, I know.
But we understand, drawing a tangent from what is happening with the late former president. Moi, as you have ably said, touched people in various ways across the divide, from Lunga Lunga to Busia. At least you would hear good tidings around him by people who he touched in various ways. I was born actually when Moi took up the reins of power. Was bred during the same period, went to school during the same period, started work when Moi was still the president. So Moi's presidency was quite synonymous, and we thought as young children that Moi actually meant presidency. Many a times I remember, as inquisitive as children would be, we could ask our parents, who is the Moi of Uganda or Moi of Tanzania? Because we thought Moi actually meant presidency. So coming from that, a very elaborate Moism, you understand how Moi became the last person to enjoy imperial powers. I remember the words of the late former Tanzanian president, Julius Nyerere Mwalimu. He said, having read the Tanzanian constitution, he realizes that he wields so much powers that if he so chooses to be a tyrant, he would. But I think because he wanted the best out of Tanzania, he chose not to be very much in line with the constitution. And that, therefore, is in line with what Honorable Otiende was saying, that we need to also understand the circumstances under which Moi served as president of Kenya, and the constitution then, even though they had the latitude to tinker with the constitution many a times to suit his preferences.
Yes.
And that happened many times, but again, we come back to the circumstances around that. When you look at Moi, in general, you may either choose to paint him using a bigger brush, and that means you want to focus on the good things that he did. In the alternative, you may choose the little brush and look at the tyrannical part of who President Moi was. The detention without trial, or you could be tried and be jailed, and you could be serving sentences forever. There could be the element of looking at how he expanded the education system, having found only 2 universities, I think Nairobi University and Kenyatta, which I think was then a constituent college of the University of Nairobi. But by the time he was leaving, we had so many universities, both public and private, that he had helped establish.
Yes.
You look at how he fought soil erosion, and I made this clear in my speech yesterday within Parliament.
Yes.
There are many good things that Moi could be remembered for. But one thing that is also standing out is when he said Kanu is going to rule for another 100 years. Looking at what is happening then, happened soon after with Mwai Kibaki becoming his successor. And Mokibaki definitely was a member of KANU for a long period of time. And now Uhuru Kenyatta, an ardent member of KANU. Yes, and he has very positive accolades for Moi, including receiving $1 million shillings in campaigns. And all of us here have done politics. we seldom get monies from any quarters to do your campaigns. You fundraise for yourself because people expect you to give, not to receive. And that is the nature of the Kenyan politics. So for one to have received 1 million shillings, that goes a long way.
You are leader from that area who receives from you,
yes,
rather than giving you support.
Right, right.
Yes.
So even if Kenyatta will be exiting office, definitely somebody who must have subscribed to KANU in one way or another will succeed him. And perhaps their children will hence take over. So Moi's prophecy of 100 years in power may not be far away from the truth. I see my brother Linturi is very happy to hear that. So, my first encounter with Moi, of course, we saw him in the news, you know, had a lot about him. But when I graduated, I got a job with an American organization that was to do some charitable work here in Kenya. And they had shipped in some food items from the United States to help distribute in drought-stricken areas. And we had this problem with the Treasury to get that tax waiver. So somebody introduced us to his handlers, one Aaron Toikong, who was initially MD Chemelil Sugar Company, and another handler called Sumbeyu, General. So then they introduced us to Moi. And the day that we were going to see Moi, you know, few years after he had exited office, I think that was in 2003. But, you know, he still was Moi, you know, with all those powers around him. So we went to Cabernet Gardens, and we were put in some holding room, waiting to see him. And a few minutes later, somebody flung the door open, and my eye and Moi's eyes locked, and that was Moi. I don't know where he came from, because that was just a holding room. To say I was confused is an understatement. But later on, when we went to meet with him, and I was in the company of my elder brother, Shem, together with some Americans who we were working together with, we went to meet with him in his private place. I was meant to take notes out of the meetings. Of course, I did not. We were given some very nice tea I did not take, because the entire time I kept on looking at Moi and, you know, trying to understand, is this the same person who we have always known to be the only president of this country?
Yes.
So that to me was very nice. Of course, during that time he had exited office, so he was not as philanthropic as he was to my brother, Honorable Linturi, meaning we did not get anything. Of course, we never expected anything anyway. But at the end, he picked his phone call and talked to President Kibaki about our case. And that same afternoon, we got our tax waiver. And we were able to get our food out of the consignment, out of the, you know, where they were kept. And we distributed across the country. So, you know, you could remember Moi for very, very many things. And I remember also, when we were young children in school, primary school, and each time he made a trip out of Nairobi towards Nyanza, that was akin to a public holiday, because all the children would go by the roadside, and we could plant some dummy, you know, banana suckers, and we could wait, and there were no phone calls. So if Moi was to come, you would go there at 7. Certain times he would appear at 5 or 6 in the evening, and you could not break to go for lunch, because you never know when he would pass. A few times he stopped, and just as my brother with a similar experience, we could wait for the first car to pass, the one written President's Escort in a red number plate. And then we could all flock the road, and then he could stop. But certain times also they could, you know, the security would disperse us and, you know, shove you on both sides of the road, and he would just go. A few times, yes, he really became too generous to us, and we could get certain things. But, you know, you remember how even when he reached a destination, he could call that small shopping center by its name. You know, he really profiled this country. He really knew this country so well that I do not think there is any other president who would have a similar knowledge as, as President Moi. Of course, he served for a longer period of
Yes,
time. But there are many, many things that we can remember from President Moi. I was very privileged yesterday, together with my brother Otindia Molo, to be in Parliament at a time such as this, to eulogize Moi and immortalize him for the good that he did for this country. And that will go in the annals of history till eternity.
Right.
So I feel very privileged that I was part and parcel